It's like I've done Duolingo. I was doing Esperanto a few months back just because I'm
Oh
obnoxious.
yeah, Esperanto.
But I don't think you
What
can
is
actually
that?
learn a language and like have like a conversation with it using one of those apps.
She's asking what is Esperanto?
Esperanto is real dumb. Esperanto was envisioned as this like world language, and it was gonna get rid of the need for. It was gonna allow the entire world to communicate with everyone else.
Oh, I've never heard of it.
So
He wanted the whole world to talk one language.
So
Oh
it's
my
this
God.
language that was just invented. It didn't have roots in anything. It wasn't a naturally
What?
occurring language. It was an entirely manufactured language.
Oh my God. When did this happen?
Oh man, like the 1930s, 1920s.
No
What?
way.
I need to. Okay, I need to deep dive this. I've never heard of this.
It's real goofy. I don't remember a lot of it. I know that to ask someone like how they're doing, it's "Kiel vi fartas."
What the fuck?
So, we got another topic here. Where do non-Spanish speakers fit into Hispanic culture? Because I have a belief that, a lot of people who don't speak Spanish, sometimes, especially the ones coming up, we get chastised for not either teaching our young ones Spanish or them not knowing it. So I was raised in a very Spanish speaking household. So I learned it naturally, but I never really spoke it until I was older. So I was in a place where I could understand everything that was being told to me, but I couldn't really respond back in like a fluent manner of speaking. But everybody always got on me for it when I was a kid. And church, oh, how do you not teach your kids Spanish? It was always some bullshit. And I get it, I get it. You want your kid to be set up for success and stuff like that. But I think sometimes language doesn't work that way, in my opinion, especially when you're speaking it with your family and stuff like that. Sometimes you got kids that are quieter than others. They're not really talkative. And then you got some kids that are. So I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I feel like growing up, I mean, like, so me and my brothers, at least from my parents, were the first people born in the States, right? So I feel like that desire of like your children learning Spanish, knowing the culture, all that stuff is like these people came from another country to kind of try to, get a better life for their family, but they still want you to be of that culture. They don't want you to like lose that part of like, because if you don't talk Spanish, your kids are going to talk Spanish, and then it's almost like their legacy in some part of their legacy is dead, And that's the vibe I always got with like my family. So like my family, we're Dominican, right? So everybody has to be able to dance. Everybody has to, everybody got to talk Spanish. You got to be loud. Probably got to be late to things. Like there's all these things you got to buy in to be part of the culture. And it's like, well, as soon as you're like bucking those trends, people look at you like, oh man, look at this guy. He's trying to be American over here.
What are you doing showing up 10 minutes early, huh, bud?
Yeah, in Dominican culture, everybody who doesn't want to dance is like crazy chastised. Like every little like shy kid who's like sitting in the corner, every aunt and cousin, they're trying to yank them onto the dance floor, and it's an I was one of those kids. So like as I gotten older, I enjoyed dancing, right? But as a kid, it was so embarrassing. I didn't want to dance, and it was like being chastised all the time about it. It was depressing.
That's funny. My experience was interesting because my parents were they were second generation, right? So and they both kind of went to school in Texas growing up, and they went to like Catholic schools and like religious schools growing up. And so they when they were speaking Spanish in school, they would get beat by the nuns.
I was gonna mention that. Yeah,
it was not allowed. They would beat the shit out of them anytime they spoke Spanish. Yeah. So my first language was actually Spanish. I spent a lot of time with my grandpa growing up, and I just talked straight up Spanish. Around the time I started school, though, my parents stopped talking to me in Spanish at home, and I kind of lost all my Spanish because this is which is it's kind of like darkly funny now because their reasoning at the time was they didn't want to put me at a disadvantage by having Spanish be my primary language. But it's because of their experience when they went to school. So like my Spanish now is still super weak. I can kind of catch context in sentences and things like that, but I can't put together a sentence to save my life. Like my Spanish is super weak. So yeah, I've definitely dealt with a lot of like that question growing up, like how are you Mexican if you don't speak Spanish? Why would you're not a real Mexican? All that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's so many layers to it. There's so many reasons why someone wouldn't know Spanish. And I probably did at one point make fun of people that didn't know Spanish because I was, a dumb young person who had no idea that there were layers to this. But there's so many reasons. I grew up speaking Spanish because my parents were immigrants and they did not know English. And so that is all we spoke until probably school or preschool. Maybe they started introducing English at preschool, and then but even all our classes were bilingual up till second grade. And, then, we spoke English at school with our friends. And still Spanish was the only thing we spoke at home. So I would say I'm very fluent. Still, there are words that I have no idea. And when I visit family in Mexico, they still call me a pocha, and that's fine. I embrace it. I am a pocha. But yeah, why is that an insult among other like here in the US among people that are first generation, second generation? Why I don't know why it's an insult, honestly, because it shouldn't be. Like there's so many reasons why someone doesn't know Spanish. I have cousins who we all grew up together, and like the youngest sibling will be the one that just didn't learn Spanish because by then the older kids were in school and they were fluent. They had to speak Spanish to their parents because parents didn't know Spanish or English. But by then they could translate the youngest kid. And then, the youngest kid is like the most neglected kid. I'm not going to lie. And so by then it was like, yeah, this kid could, like one of my younger cousins, he could understand Spanish, but he didn't speak it. Or when he spoke it, it was bad. You could sort of guess what he was saying, and he understood every word being told to him, but he couldn't speak it. And that is a common story. Another common story, like you said, people, especially like in Texas, and people who were here for like a longer time, they couldn't speak Spanish in school. Like I did an episode for Historias Unknown about Robb Elementary before the shooting that Uvalde, that it was like the only school for Mexicans, and none of the teachers spoke Spanish. The parents all spoke Spanish. The kids were hit every time they spoke Spanish, and they couldn't speak it. So some people will go home and still speak Spanish, but some people will have their own kids and they'll be like, I don't want them to experience the same thing I did. Yep. So we're not going to teach them Spanish. And it just, sometimes you grow out of it. Like I'm trying to speak Spanish with my kids, and that's the only language I use with them. But my husband is Filipino and white, and so he doesn't know Spanish. He talks to them in English. My stepson, he's white. he obviously he knows some Spanish, but he speaks in English. He can understand some of it, so he talks to them in English. All of my husband's family, they speak English. So my kids, like my son is 4 now. His name is also Mateo, by the way. Yeah, but he can say some Spanish words, and he will say them, and he understands everything that's being told to him, but he will only reply in English. I'm not gonna force him to reply in Spanish, and I would like him to know Spanish. And when he is in school, I'm going to put him in immersion Spanish classes, but I'm not going to make fun of him if he doesn't know Spanish, because it's not going to be his fault. I'm doing what I can, and that's all you can do. But like, that doesn't make anyone less Latina, less Mexican. Like, no, it doesn't. So
your
that's
roots
how I
are
feel
your
about
roots.
It. Yeah.
Sorry, that was loud ambulance.
I was trying to figure out who screamed.
I'm sorry, that was me. I'm sorry. Come by there.
The getting beat for talking Spanish, so I'm not super familiar with stories like that in the States. Like I'm only because I've like read and listened to podcasts and things like that. Like I'm familiar with, like, in Canada, they had these like residential schools for like the indigenous populations that live there. And yeah, they literally beat the indigenous languages out of these kids. Like all these like older indigenous people grew up there missing like big chunks of this the culture of their parents. Like, and those schools are fucked up too. They would yank
Horrible.
kids away from their families, so they would live in like it was like a boarding school. They'd live there for months at a time. So
They made it so it was the only school, and it was like illegal not to send your kids. Then the parents would get sent to jail for not sending their kids to school. But this was the only school.
Just government-sponsored kidnapping, basically.
No, this is the one where they found
genocide and kidnapping.
They all found the burial sites in. This is where they found the burial sites. Underneath the school, hundreds of bodies underneath the school. I remember hearing about that. That was so fucking terrible.
Yeah, there's a really good podcast called Stolen. She talks about the school her dad went to. And that's the whole season 1. That's what it's about. But yeah, highly recommend it. It's really good.
Need to check that one out.
Depressing though.
Yeah, I've actually listened to the same podcast. It is really good.
My family
it starts off with like her dad had been abused in residential school, and he was like a cop, and he pulled over some drunk driver, and it happened to be one of the priests that abused him as a kid, and he just like beat the living shit out of this priest.
I was like, yeah,
and I was like, fuck yeah, like
yeah.
But yeah, then the whole podcast then gets into like the school he went to and just trying to find out information about who were the administration that worked there and what type of abuse was these children suffered and things like that. It's really fucked up.
Damn.
Yeah. It's horrible.
Oh no, it sounds very interesting. I know it's horrible, but it sounds like a good podcast.
It's fascinating. I mean,
it's why everyone watches true crime or listens to true crime podcasts, right? Like it's horrifying shit, but man, it's so easy to just eat up. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's wild. So I was gonna say, there's like my family's coming in from Cuba. You'll find 2 different types of Cubans. Cubans that migrated from America and are the proudest Cubans you'll ever meet. And then there's the Cubans that came to America that don't really want anything to do with Cuba anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So they either they'll even say they're white. So like they'll even just be like, "Nah, I'm white." And because they wanted to immigrate into the US. They wanted to shed their, so my grandfather didn't really like, I guess he spent his entire life over there. He came over here and he asked the people, they said, "Where do you want to go, Mr. Costa?" He says, "Where the least amount of Cubans are." And then they sent him to New York. So already you got a person that could only speak Spanish in a place where Irish people and all sorts of different English speaking people. So it was already with the generation, my mom and her brothers, it was 7, if I'm not correct, 7 or 6. And so they all were Spanish speaking, but they all learned how to speak English correctly. So they all speak English.
Pause. The place with the least Cubans is New York City. I don't believe that. I think it's probably somewhere in like Ohio or Kentucky or West Virginia.
It could have been at the time though.
At the time in the 70s, early 70s, I think it was like 70, early, either 75 or something like that.
I think they were definitely trying to send them to cities though.
Yeah, it's got to be like the big cities basically is what.
Yeah.
I think it's like not South Florida. Okay, send me to not South Florida. Yeah, and believe it or not, New York City had a pretty healthy like Cuban population. Like at that time, it's like because the Cubans were really like the first like Caribbean people, that Spanish speakers that like went to New York City. So like New York City is known for like a big like Puerto Rican population, but the Cubans were there first, then the Puerto Ricans, then the Dominicans. And
were they? Because I know there was a huge migration of Puerto Ricans after like World War II to New York, but I don't know. I have never looked into like Cuban migration into New York.
There were a lot of Cubans. When we say a lot, there were neighborhoods, and you'd see a lot where Cubans lived. There's not so many more anymore. It changed. It went a lot of those neighborhoods changed. You even have a lot of African neighborhoods, and then now Mexican culture, Guatemala, Hondurans, they're a big part of New York, which is beautiful
Oh,
because it's like
wow.
it's
Okay.
yeah. There's big neighborhoods in Queens that are just Ecuadorian and
You were
very it's
you were telling me about that the last time that I went up there, and that had changed just between the last time I went up and however many years it had been since the time before. Like in a span of like
mhm,
3 or 4 years, it felt like it changed.
yeah.
I don't know if the population like got bigger, but I know when I grew up in Jamaica, like in Queens, I like aside from like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, the other Spanish speakers were El Salvadorians and Ecuadorians, like that lived in Jamaica with us.
Really?
Yeah,
I
so
always associated New York with like Puerto Rico, the DR, and
Uh-huh.
Cuba. But I never think about like other groups that are obviously there.
I mean, if you go to any single restaurant in New York City, it's all Mexicans that work there. So like, there's a healthy Mexican population. They I don't know what Mexican neighborhoods are in New York, but they're literally
Uh
working
huh.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I find that interesting that like I don't know when you think of like South American countries, you think of like Texas and New Mexico and California and stuff, but even South Florida, there's a lot. There's a lot of Guatemalans. There's a lot of Nicaraguans, El Salvadorians,
Huh.
Mexicans.
The coolest thing also about that is that it'll be a Italian owned restaurant and the Mexicans are making Italian pizza, authentic Italian pizza. And I'm like, yo, this is pretty
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
And it's cool. It's very cool. Steakhouses that I go to, Ricardo Steakhouse is a very big Filipino staff, and then Mexican are cooking and stuff like that. So it's dope. The way that everybody integrated here. And now we have a big, huge migrant population here that just came in because they're busing them in from Texas. So we
Mm.
have like 400,000, if I think something like that.
Oh,
They're
that's
So
busing them
awesome.
in from Texas.
yeah.
Is it these like racist politicians that are doing this?
Yep, from
Yeah.
different red
Yeah.
states are busing them into Massachusetts, to New York. So basically, our shelter population is at max. Basically, they so
I really dislike these like political games that they've started playing
yeah.
with people that are just trying to start a new fucking
I
life.
could
I gotta be
not. I was so mad when he sent over them to. They said, didn't they send them over to like a, what was it? Someone's
Martha's
house? Someone's
Vineyard, Martha's
vineyard.
Vineyard,
That's what it was. I was like,
which
are
is an
you? I
island
cannot.
that's like for the super posh and rich.
Yeah.
It's like
They do
Wasn't
not want an influx of immigrants.
wasn't it
in
like
Martha's Vineyard.
like 40 degrees outside or some shit too? It was
it's really fucked
Yeah.
up. It's really
Yeah.
fucked up. But if there's one place, if I gotta be completely honest, if there's one place that any of these people could survive and make anything out of themselves, is New York. New York is, I'm welcome them. You know what I mean? They're great people,
Yeah.
bro. I really love the people that I've met, that I've gotten to know, and very special people.
Yeah,
Honestly,
New York City allow like a complete Spanish speaking immigrant to move over there and not change anything about themselves. They could still go shopping, they could get jobs, and
That's
never have to
amazing.
learn
Yeah.
English. Like, because there's these neighborhoods in New York that like there's just so many immigrants that talk Spanish that are like nobody needs to learn English. Like my dad barely talks
Love it.
English. Like my grandparents, they lived in New York City for more years than they lived in the Dominican Republic, and they never had to learn English. My generation, like me, my brother, my cousins, like we're the first people that really learned English. Like my mother grew up in Brooklyn. Like she moved to Dominican Republic when she was like maybe like 11 or 12. So she speaks English like perfectly fine. But like aside from that, it's like all the elders barely talk any kind of English. Yeah.
yeah.
so go ahead.
Go for it, Doey.
I was gonna say, so like the reason I didn't know is like my mom already spoke really proper English when I was growing up, and it didn't feel like it was a requirement. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? In my family, I felt like learning English, how to speak English properly, and I guess that's what translated to me was like the reading and the writing and stuff like that. Um, but I still try. I try because there's some really cute Spanish speaking mommies over at the, I kind of need it.
Yeah,
Sorry, hold on.
You talking Spanish is one of my favorite things ever because it's call me a bad person. I make fun of Dewey for his bad Spanish.
I feel like it's
But-
gotten better though. Not that I'm not. I can just hear Spanish, and it seems like it's gotten better.
It's getting there.
It's bad.
Honestly,
I
though,
love
that's impressive. Yeah.
I need to pick mine back up. I keep telling myself that I need to find one of these like immersion programs, or like there's a tutor in my neighborhood that they sell, like they do like Spanish lessons. So tempted to try to pick it up again, but
I know my library here used to do a Spanish speaking circle for like intermediate people or beginner/intermediate. So they could actually, because you can read it, you can do Duolingo, but I don't think there's anything like actually having a conversation in Spanish.
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
been my experience. Like I've done Duolingo. I was doing Esperanto a few months back just because I'm obnoxious.
Esperanto.
But I don't think you
What
can
is
actually
that?
learn a language and like have like a conversation with it using one of those apps.
She's asking what is Esperanto?
Esperanto is real dumb. Esperanto was envisioned as this like world language, and it was gonna get rid of the need for. It was gonna allow the entire world to communicate with everyone else.
Oh, I've never heard of this.
So
I wanted the whole world to talk one language.
So
Oh
it's
my
this
God.
language that was just invented. It didn't have roots in anything. It wasn't a naturally
What?
occurring language. It was an entirely manufactured language.
Oh my God. When did this happen?
Oh man, like the 1930s, 1920s.
No
What?
way.
I need to. Okay, I need to deep dive this. I've never heard of this.
It's real goofy. I don't remember a lot of it. I know that to ask someone like how they're doing, it's "Kiel vi fartas."
What the fuck?
And so apparently it was
Wow,
it was
okay.
created in 1887.
18, dude,
Yeah.
that's
I
a
have
year.
never heard of this.
1887.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's old, and it is the most widely spoken invented language, whatever that's. So not the most widely spoken language. We're talking about made up language.
Invented. Yeah.
And they say
Wow.
they estimate anywhere between 30,000 to 180,000 native speakers of Esperanto.
Oh.
Wow.
There's a lot of
He's
fucking
one of
people.
them.
Mateo's one.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting.
If I ever met another Esperanto speaker, I could ask him how they're doing, and I could tell him I'm doing okay.
If you speak Esperanto, please contact all of us.
Seriously, I'd love to. It'd be like
Oh
we
my
just had the
God.
we had Steven on, and we just treated him like the Australian dude. We just had so many questions about Australia. We were like, "What do you
I
guys
love it.
eat? What's the food like? What do you guys drink? What do you do in Australia? Are there creatures that are constantly trying to kill you?" I was like,
Now, when he told me,
I'd like that we asked Steven, like, where exactly are you from in Australia? And he described where he was, and all our eyes glazed over because we realized none of us know Australian geography. So why were we even asking that question?
I would do the same thing though.
and we
So
got
what-
ahead of ourselves there.
so when he said that kangaroos jump out in front of cars like deer does, like up here, up in the Northeast, I found that wild.
Wow.
He said he had the shed full of killer spiders. And I'm like, I wouldn't go in there. He's
I
like,
would
yeah,
not
I
have a
go in there
shed.
from time to time. I'm like, I'd burn it down. I'd be done with it.
Yeah, he casually referred to one of the spiders that lives in his shed as more dangerous than a black widow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. No.
No way.
No.
He looked around his room. He's like, yeah, I got a couple spider web, in the corners. And I'm like, I'm good.
Yo, they live harmoniously in Australia. They are one with the land. That shit is
One with-
crazy.
I think the spider's on his lease, dude.
One with
Yeah.
the spider.
Yeah, that's like New York people and rats, though. Let's be for real. New York
Oh.
people and rats, we kind of like. I got 2 cats because the rats.
You need a cat there. Yeah.
2 cats because the problem was my grandma and grandpa were scared to get out of the bed a few years ago because there was this big ass, and it wasn't no fucking mouse. It's not a little field mouse. It was a rat. and it was
I would
in the
die.
crib, and they wouldn't get up to use the bathroom because they were scared at night.
That would be me. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
pobrecito, my grandma and grandpa. So my mom brought a cat into the house, and literally the day they brought it in, the rat stopped coming in, and
Oh, good.
yeah. But you definitely need a cat in New York. If it's like you kind of need it.
I
These
just
mice.
think of the pizza rat. You saw the video of the rat holding the slice of pizza running down into
Yeah.
the subway?
It's a
Yeah,
pretty
it's
cool
like
rat.
It's the
though.
most New York shit ever.
Yeah, like a hat turned sideways.
Yeah, all he needed was the Timbs and the Yankee fitted. It would have been over.
Wow.
Oh my God,
So-
Joey! Please get a pet rat and put some Tims on it, dude.
No, I can't, dude. There's people that do that over here. I'm like, no. They'll have like a pet rat.
I can't even imagine holding one.
I'd rather have a pet rat than a pet spider. We'll say that much.
Okay, well then, yeah.
Nah.
If you had to make
I
me
would
choose,
have neither.
Just looking at a rat's tail makes my stomach like turn.
That's
like,
what
just-
it is.
It's so
the
thick
tail.
and it's ribbed. It's just so fucking disturbing. I can't
Blech.
look at it.
What is
Oh.
that rat's name from Charlotte's Web? Turkleton? You don't remember the rat? He sings a song
The
about all the food he wants
oh,
to eat.
I remember
Mm-mm.
the rat. I don't think his name was anything close to that.
No, it might not be.
Tunkerton. No.